Peter, we had you on, I think it was over a year ago now, as you've been one of the first people to talk about the fact that you believe Lucy Letby could be innocent. However, you wrote this week that you don't believe people should watch the documentary.
No, they shouldn't. It's horrible, and it's actually literally obscene in the meaning of the word, which is that some things should be kept off stage. You see scenes of human grief and pain so terrible that you as you witness them, you wish you weren't doing it, and they leave you permanently, I think, damaged. And I wished I hadn't seen it. I did watch it twice because I was anxious, knowing after that I was going to be critical of it. I was anxious to make sure that I was properly right. But that's because that's what I do. But it is a horrible thing to see, and I would advise people not to see the particular scene of her being taken away with her mother in a state of near collapse.
Yes, I agree with you. It was truly harrowing watching it. And
I've never heard anybody make that sound before, and I hope not to hear it again.
Yeah, and so harrowing that Lucy told her not to look as she was being taken away in the police car. Do you see the importance of showing harrowing, shocking moments to show the human side of someone who is deemed as a baby killer?
No, I don't think. If you want to discuss this, what you need to discuss is what happened and how it happened and the details and the truth of it. It's completely unnecessary to do this. And it's interesting, the Cheshire Police, who I refer to as the shy and retiring Cheshire Police, because they, whenever I ask them any questions, they won't answer them, were given a huge platform in which to put forward a plodding, pretty much unreconstructed version of the melodrama which they created in the first place to persuade the courts that Lucy Letby was guilty. And you call it a documentary, but did you notice a peculiar thing about it? Nobody in the program, none of the people who feature, is questioned. There is no questioning voice. So during the whole presentation of the police case, which takes up, by my reckoning, the first hour of a 90-minute program, the police are allowed to make repeated statements about how certain things happened and about how certain things are incontrovertible, which are never challenged in the light of what we know. It's true that in the later part of the program, some time is given to the Shuley panel of experts and to the other criticisms of the prosecution case. But the thing is, if it were a documentary, surely you would say to them, well, hang on now that we know this, how can you say that? And it wasn't done. There was no visible person doing that, and it's quite striking. If it's a documentary, shouldn't you have had that?
Yeah, it's important to say as well, the parents weren't asked whether they could share, whether Cheshire Police could share this footage.
No.
And they have since said they won't watch the documentary because it would probably kill them.
Yes.
What do you think was Cheshire Police's motivation in sharing this footage with Netflix?
Well, I'm not Cheshire Police. I don't attribute motivations to people when I don't know what they are. But I would say to anybody who sees the outcome, what do you think it might have been? But I'm not impressed, to put it like that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another thing, which I think was very striking about. There were several things about the program which I think were unintentionally striking. One of the consultants, for instance, finally admitting that he might have some doubts about the conviction. The mother of one of the babies who died saying that the hospital failed her. The hospital failed her, which I don't think I've heard before from any of the parents involved, though this is very much the conclusion of the Shuley panel. But also, the chief of the investigation, Detective Chief Superintendent Paul Hughes, says at one point he received an email from Lucy Letby during his inquiries offering to help. And we actually see details on the screen of this email, and there it is. She definitely sent it to him, offering to help. So what did I do? The following day, I contacted Cheshire Police. I said, what was the response to the email from Lucy Letby? What did they say? No comment. They're perfectly happy to have the publicity on television when they want it, but they're very unhappy, and this is frequently the case when I ask them questions, to actually discuss the matter when questioned by people who are at all sceptical.
I actually found the documentary maybe a bit more balanced than how you seem to be describing it, because sure, I think it started very much on one side, but they gave a lot. It's the nature of documentaries to be quite impactful and to persuade you and take you on a bit of a journey. This is how they grip you. They keep you watching. So I think it's natural to offer one side, lead you down a path, and then offer you a completely different side. Did you not think that the second half of it really did challenge the Cheshire Police's narrative?
Sure, for those who actually continued watching it, but how many people who buy books read them? How many people who start watching programmes watching to the end? It was shoved onto the end, whereas the whole development, we've had this now for pretty much 3 years, the police version of events, endlessly pumped out. But what we've also had during that time, an immense cloud of witnesses coming out and saying, these statistics are wrong, these claims of a confession are wrong, the witnesses have been found to have contradicted themselves, the door swipe evidence was wrong, and then the other day the Crown Prosecution Service declined to proceed on new supposed evidence collected by Cheshire Police. These are enormous developments, and you've also had the Shuley panel. It's immensely detailed examination of the evidence supposedly against Lucy Letby by people far more qualified, it seems to me, than anyone who spoke in court. And those are important, and they shouldn't be shoved on a sort of caboose at the back end of the programme. They should have been constantly present in a big way. So that the Cheshire Police, when they said, for instance, this very, very dubious insulin evidence was still incontrovertible, they should have been challenged on screen, and they should have been asked, in the light of what we now know, how can you still say that? Of course, the programme couldn't have left out all that, but it wasn't integral to the production. That is also my feeling of it. It was at the back end rather than actively informing the front end.
I was left wondering why Lucy Letby's defence have not, in the trial, have not been scrutinised. They were approached for comment, they declined to comment. There seemed to be so many weaknesses in her defence, including her friend saying, why were there no defence witnesses? Have you contacted them? Have you had any?
Oh, no, they don't talk. They will not discuss it. And the original defence team, they won't discuss it. There have been various suggestions made, which I don't know whether they're correct or not about it, which would involve a lot of legal technicality, which I don't fully understand. We don't know. But in the end, this is what happened. There's no point going over it. So what? If the case had been if the case that we now know had been presented in court, I think we would have had a different result, as we see, I think, from the Crown Prosecution Service declining to go ahead with the cases which Cheshire Police put before them, and Cheshire Police plainly being very cheesed off by that.
The next step is, in many ways, to prove that if it wasn't that the babies were murdered, it had to have been NHS incompetence.
It doesn't. No such stage exists in English law. The defendant does not have to prove her innocence. What we have to establish is that she was not convicted beyond reasonable doubt. That there was reasonable doubt. That's all you need to do. Proving somebody innocent it is in many ways impossible.
But part of that would require that you can prove that the unusual number of baby deaths can be explained.
Well, you're starting by saying it's an unusual number of baby deaths. I mean, there's a constant, appalling stream of deaths and other tragedies, particularly in maternity services, so much so that the Secretary of State for Health, Wes Streeting, has announced yet another inquiry into it only a few months ago. It's not particularly shocking, but that's just a process of thought. What you have to do here is say, what evidence has ever been produced that Lucy Letby was involved in killing or harming any baby? The answer is none. Is the circumstantial evidence which was produced by the Cheshire Police and the Crown Prosecution Service at the two original trials sufficient to convict her beyond reasonable doubt? No.
I think one of the things the documentary does very well is explain who Shu Li is, who has been leading the investigation into each baby's death and describing why his analysis is that they weren't murders. And Shu Li wrote the original paper.
Well, he wrote an original paper on which Dowie Evans, the chief prosecution expert witness, based his theory that the babies had been killed by air embolism. But it's quite clear that Shu Li, when he heard about this, was, how shall I put this, dismayed that his paper had been used in this way, and felt that it had obviously not been correctly used. I'm being as mild as I possibly can about this. I really don't want to get angry with the people who were involved in what I suspect is a miscarriage of justice, because there's no point. What I want to do is to make sure that the miscarriage of justice is undone, and Lucy Letby gets a fair hearing in court, which I don't think she got.
And what are the next steps?
Well, the next steps are the Criminal Cases Review Commission has the case before it, and it has to decide whether to recommend to the Court of Appeal whether to hear it again. And then the Court of Appeal has to decide whether it believes that a case has been made for hearing it again, which is by no means guaranteed, because the Court of Appeal is historically extremely reluctant to do this, even in the case of the people in the Birmingham Six particularly, and various other important ones, just not keen on doing it. And there is, you know, the famous appalling vista remark made by that great judge, Lord Denning, who was reluctant to reopen cases because if the things which were being said about the police and prosecution were true, it was such an appalling vista that he couldn't contemplate it. The Court of Appeal doesn't like reopening cases. It really, really doesn't. And those of us who campaign on this case have to be aware of that. This is not, although I think any fair-minded person who now reads everything that there is to be read about this can see that there's something seriously wrong with the prosecution, and the verdict is plainly unsafe. That doesn't mean the Court of Appeal will agree.
Do you know why it took 23 months to go to trial?
Well, I think a lot of things were going on. There was the COVID panic and many other things, but it is shocking, isn't it, that someone should be held in custody for nearly 2 years. On such a case. And it's interesting as well, she was arrested 3 times. 3 times, which is quite unusual.
Before she was charged.
Before she was actually charged.
Yeah.
It was an immensely long process, during which I think she became seriously distressed and began taking various forms of medication, which might explain quite a lot of the behaviour which people, her demeanour in court, which people criticise. I mean, you know, it is known, for instance, that the trial had to be postponed at the beginning because she was so distraught. Did you know that?
I didn't.
No, it's in the book, the Judith Moritz and Jonathan Coffey book, which is with some faults, quite a good guide to the case. It says quite clearly this happened. Everybody in the courtroom knew that it had to be put off because she had basically a sort of breakdown. And now that we know what it. If those people who've not taken my advice and have watched Netflix know the sort of things she'd been going through for all those months, then perhaps they might understand that. It gives me the shudders, honestly, the whole thing. I mean, I spent a few days in a pretend prison a few years ago for a TV series, and these are terrible places for the innocent if they are innocent.
Do you know anyone, apart from her parents and the barrister, who is in contact with Lucy Letby?
I have no idea. I'm not in contact myself.
So is she involved in the attempts to...
Well, obviously she sees Mark MacDonald quite frequently, her new barrister. So, yes, she knows what's going on. But that I know from what Mark MacDonald has said publicly, I think.
Yeah. And... is this being funded by...
There is no funding. It's all... No, Mark MacDonald is working for nothing.
Interesting. Do you think the Cheshire Police... I understand you can't speak for them, but...
Well, I can speak to them, but most of my contacts with them consist of freedom of information applications, which they then don't...
I wonder how they... felt about the documentary having seen it, because
You'd have to ask them. I mean, given that plainly they were involved with the makers of it, this is reflected in the use of this exciting, appalling, exclusive footage. I imagine that they would be reasonably satisfied with it. What was clear from, I don't know when the interviews were conducted with the Cheshire police officers who we saw in the programme, but they don't seem to be particularly worried about their case.
yes.
Did you see any sign in any of them that they were, that, unlike that consultant who said, I have some tiny doubts? You didn't hear any of that from any police officer, did you? Not even a tiny micro doubt.
Yeah. I suppose one thing that's difficult is the nature of how court cases go, and how you have a jury who is asked to listen to scientists. So when you go and you have a scientist give evidence, you somewhat assume that it's true. In the same way, that's what Cheshire Police rely on, expert analysis.
Well, it's true, but it is, if you go through the trial, which I have a bit, but it's vast. I still haven't completely done it. The defence did give the expert witnesses for the prosecution quite a hard time, but the problem is this isn't evidence, and it's also very interesting in the Judith Moritz Jonathan Coffey book how very important the insulin part of the evidence was to getting a conviction, and that quite possibly tipped the jury over, who up till then, people seem to think that a very long trial is proof that you've got a lot of evidence. In fact, it's rather the opposite. The less you have, the more you have to give an impression. And the insulin claim and the way in which I feel the defence was sort of manoeuvred into accepting what I don't believe is true, that there was an attempt to poison babies with artificial insulin, had a great impact on the jury, partly because it was so much more straightforward than the air embolism evidence that we hear so much about. But no one knows why juries make up their minds. Or how, and they aren't allowed to. That's quite proper in my view. So we can only guess about that. But certainly it was the impression of Moritz and Coffey that was a very crucial part of it. It's an interesting book. I mean, they turned out to be a great deal more balanced than I expected them to be, and it's anybody who's really interested in the whole thing should definitely read it.
Did they go through the court transcript?
Well, Judith Moritz was I think in the court the whole time. I think Jonathan Coffey was there a lot as well. I mean, there isn't any question. They have a very good grasp of the trial.
Yeah.
And they're both very serious journalists.
Yeah. I remember the first time we booked you on to come and speak about Lucy Letby, in the office, it was a really controversial decision to make. A lot of people felt like we were sensationalising a story about a baby killer. And at the time, we made a call, and I'm definitely happy that we made the call we did now, but making that call now is a completely different set of circumstances to how it was a year or so ago.
A bit longer, actually.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
But the thing was, there was a long period of enforced silence when the contempt of court sub judice rules prevented anybody from saying anything about it, and all there was the brilliant article by Rachel Aviv in the New Yorker, which was circulated as samizdat.
Yeah. Do you see, I think some people on your side of this probably think there's no other way other than eventually some form of a retrial. I mean, this issue isn't...
What do you think we're going to descend on Bronzefield Prison with pitchforks? No, the law has to decide, and that has to be done in court properly according to the rules.
Yeah, but the pressure's mounting to such an extent.
Well, I hope so, because I think the Court of Appeal will not be interested unless it's clear that there is a major living controversy about it, and the Court of Appeal has to be the one. Without them, nothing can happen. And
what do you feel is missing and for that to then proceed? You know, in terms of the campaign.
Missing. I think there are a lot of people. I mean, I won't name any names because it would be stupid and rude. But I wrote to a number of fairly sort of major public figures some months ago, asking them if they would get involved because I thought their voices, for various reasons, would add to it. And they said no, just not interested. And so there's still an awful lot of work to be done so that people who are prominent in public life, whether in politics or journalism or wherever it is, are aware of the fact that this could be a truly horrible injustice. I mean, the idea of sending someone to prison knowing that they will die there, use your imagination for a moment. If that happened to you and you had not done the thing for which you've been sentenced, just imagine the profundity of the injustice and the profundity of the misery. Those who still say that they believe that she's guilty, well, I have to keep my mind open to that, or I can't argue with them if I'm not taking their position seriously. All right, maybe she is guilty. I don't think that she is, from what I can see. I think that, as I say, the conviction is unsafe, but I don't know she's not guilty. So, okay, what is the best way of testing this? And the best way of testing it is for it to go back into court and to be re-examined with the knowledge which we've subsequently gained. And there's a lot of knowledge we've subsequently gained. But for that to happen, I still think it needs a lot more people in prominent positions in public life to come off the fence. And I particularly like, for instance, the Secretary of State for Health, Mr. Streeting, who was very critical of people who raised doubts some time ago, saying that they were upsetting the parents. I would really like it if he would at least withdraw that. I can see it would be difficult for him to join Jeremy Hunt, who is a former Secretary of State for Health, who has said that he's worried about the case, but he might at least pull back from that.
I wonder if it would take one of the parents to say, I would like this to go to
I don't think we can put any. The parents have had such horrible. The loss of a child is just so unbearable. The parents have had so much weight placed upon them as it is. I don't think one should ask anything of them. I completely understand many of them are indeed angry with what I do. I understand it. I think that fundamentally they're mistaken, but they are entitled to be angry. I think it would be wrong to try and oppress or recruit them into any kind of position on this. And I just what we need is for people in public life who are people of prominence and knowledge and understanding, and whose opinions are relied on by their readers or viewers. I wish they would come out and say, let's have this reconsidered. Because you see, if the Court of Appeal does hear it, if the CCRC does say you should reopen this, if the Court of Appeal does hear it and then they say, no, we're not moving, then those of us who've been campaigning all this time can't stop. We can't say, oh, well, that's it then, we're giving up. We have to carry on. And it will not end, but it could be 10, 15, 20 years before it is actually heard. Imagine that. Imagine that for Lucy Letby. If she is not guilty, imagine wearing out her days, having her life eaten by the locust, year after year after year, with nobody even interested in giving her another hearing. I think that's shocking. Many more people should be shocked by it.
We better leave it there, but Peter Hitchens, thank you for joining us on Spectator TV.
Thank you for having me.